mind, she draws attention to the tendency to eliminate the moral point of view in school, especially teachers in public schools, adopting an attitude to parse the fundamental categories of good and evil, and to interpret the world in our way. However, here they come to seemingly contradictory statements. On the one hand, a growing interest in the topic of virtues across the world. On the other, the supposed decline of morality in education. In the book she edited, Virtue Ethics, Retrospect and Prospect, published by Springer in 2019, she discussed the problem in her own chapter with the title The Big Risk Behind the Exploding Virtues. To cite her, talking about virtues, studying virtues, even meditating on virtues have become social trends that are increasingly popular among scholars. These tendencies, however, are being developed apart from the concept of actual being virtues. So the question is, what type of character education makes sense to develop, and specifically what type of moral reasoning and reflection? Elisa comes to think with us about a good answer in her lecture, Education Among Amorality and Immorality, the Virtues.
So thank you very much for the very generous presentation. And in the spirit of the good family school, I wish to thank you, Professor Andrei Resch, first of all, and all the team of the School of Character for the very kind invitation and hospitality. I'm delighted and honored to have the possibility to speak in front of this group of young scholars and professors, future teachers, and educators. I believe that today, more than ever, we need good and courageous teachers. We live in a time where this is really needed, and so thank you for your commitment and purpose in your research, studies, and teachings. Considering our daily topic, moral reflection in ethical education, in my talk, I decided to contribute to the discussion on philosophical aspects of moral reflection in ethical education and character education. I will try to answer the question about what type of moral thinking and reflection it makes sense to develop in moral education at schools, in the lessons of ethical education, and in general. The first aspect that needs to be reflected on is that virtuous cycle between teacher and student, that if active can lead to maximum learning. The premise is certainly first that the teacher is prepared, and second, that there is the good will of the student to learn. Nevertheless, these two aspects are not always sufficient, and the great premise of this goal lies in its setting, which I derive from the philosopher Dietrich von Hildebrand. So it is realism, or rather phenomenological realism. And the definition that he gave in an unpublished paper is a talk that he gave in Washington. Well, I quote, he says, "In speaking of phenomenology, I remind the immediate intuitive contact with the intelligible data of experience, the analysis of their essence in contradistinction to all kinds of exploration of their genesis or hypothesis and abstract explanatory constructions." So, in fact, imagine that you suddenly wake up and find yourself in front of a snowy peak. Well, this beauty, this wonder, we will now see what it means, raises in you the philosophical question par excellence. What is this word? What is the word? Why is it there? Who gives to you? So this is the second question. So who gives to you? We shall see, however, that this last question is increasingly covered by fog. Even even though there is a sunshine on the mountains on the horizon. So if the Greeks' knowledge begins with wonder, with the evolution of civilization, the ability to be surprised seems to have declined. I will therefore first examine the concept of wonder, emphasizing the importance of what I call the experience of the wonderfulness in education. Just let me show the structure of this talk. There are three parts. In the first part, I will examine the experience of the wonderfulness. In the second one, the proposal of different phenomena, that is the proposition between amorality and immorality. And the third part, a scholastic part. So aim for wonder, and you create wonders. But just start from the etymology of the word wonder. Why I'm focusing on wonder? Because I think it's very curious to reflect about this word, because it's a sort of engine in the education. And we will see that Greeks intend wonder in a different way than we intend. So it's not just the surprise of these beautiful snowy peaks, but is a sort of engine that encourages us to discover this context. Okay? So there is a different perspective by how Greeks intend work and how we intend. So I will focus on the etymology of the word. And you will see in the second part why it could seem very easy. So why she's speaking about wonder. So each of us with his experience. But in truth, if we reflect, there is a very different way to intend education today, considering a different way to intend also the experience of the wonderfulness. So what is wonder? I will focus on etymology. The Latin word mirabilia, wonderful things, has different meanings. So first of all, wonder means that feeling one gets from seeing, hearing, knowing something extraordinary, strange or otherwise unexpected. According to this meaning, synonyms of wonder are astonishment, surprise, and amazement. Second, wonder can also be said of a person, a thing, or a situation, to be a wonder. So imagine the love of your life. You are a wonder. So that means to be something that arouses admiration because of its beauty or some other quality. And finally, it's curious, wonder can also mean an herbaceous plant of the Nyctaginaceae, mirabilis dialopa, night beauty. It is a particular plant that has the quality of possessing flowers that open at night. So in these three different meanings, we can touch the fact that wonder means something that is unexpected, as this flower is very curious that open in the night. But what is more specifically wonder? Wonder represents the subject's astonishment at the unthought of reality. That is a reality that, until the subject discovery, has no thought for the subject. So these snowy peaks makes sense to me when I discover that. So the discovery of the wonder of a thing that for the subject is wonderful gives the object a certain thought. Or to say it even better, wonder is the expression, the outcome of the learning process of the subject in knowing a different reality. To echo the well-known Tony's definition of Virtous, wonder is the expression of the adaptation of the intellect to the thing. And this is, I created these new Latin expressions to say this declaratio, that is a manifestation, is something that makes manifest to you. Okay, so declaratio adequationis intellectus et rem. So it's the echo of the famous definition of Virtous by Thomas Kuhn. So further, looking to the Greeks now, Plato made Socrates tell Theodorus, I quote, Theodorus seems to be a pretty good guesser about your nature, for his feeling of wonder shows that you are a philosopher, since wonder is the only beginning of philosophy. And he could say that Iris was the child of Thomas who made a good genealogy. Iris is the messenger of heaven, and Plato here interprets the name of her father as wonder, and as also the famous Italian scholar who studied out Aristotle, in general ancient philosophy, recalled that Iris, so the messenger of the good among men, is here identified with philosophy, and she is the daughter of someone, the name that in Greeks recorded the verb to wander from Athens. So later it will also be Aristotle, who will recognize that the desire for knowledge finds its beginning from the wonder, felt in the face of the giving of things in the world. I quote, interpretation, it is through wonder that man now begin and originally began to philosophize, wondering in the first place at obvious perplexities, and then by gradual progression rising, question about the greater matters too, about the change of the moon and of the sun, about the stars and about the origin of the universe. So Aristotle here has the criterion by which the investigation of wonder has evolved over time as man has advanced in the process of knowledge. As also Marcello Zanatta, who is an Italian translator of metaphysics, made a very good new translation of the metaphysics, points out that Aristotle identifies as the objects of wonder first the phenomenon of the empirical world, as the realities closest to us, and then the phenomenon of the astral world, that is a phenomenon on which myth had intervened to provide explanations, also animated by the wonder from which philosophical inquiry is animated. For the ancients, so wonder initially represent not so much a dimension of astonishment, okay, as for us. There's no fix. Although the discovery of the mirror certainly generates astonishment for them as well, as the fact that something turns out to be wonderful because it is not known. As the subject advances in knowledge, who knows more, the real possibility of the giving of something wonderful gets lower. So such a Greek approach thus makes us look at the wonder as a cognitive dimension. And here I will quote again Professor Berger, who masterfully observed the wonder of which Plato and Aristotle speak as nothing aesthetic. It is purely theoretical aptitude that is cognitive, it is simply desire to know. But to know what? The why, that is the explanation of what is in front of us and whose cause we do not immediately see. Wonder is essentially a demand for an explanation, for reason. It arises from experience, from the observation of an object, an event, or an action, of which one wants to know the why, that is the cause. And he continues, to experience wonder is to ask these questions. Generally today, the person who does this is the scientist, who has very circumscribed questions about a certain class of phenomena or events, which continue the object which constitutes the object of his research. Okay, just now go through the second point, the anthropological crisis and the proposal for a religious enlightenment or a Christian enlightenment. And here I refer to Professor Grimi, his thesis. And this second part I am particular, for me, particular importance because I think that the problem of education is incredibly connected to the problem of society also. So the second point here is about the anthropological crisis generated by postmodernism and currently exacerbated by the social mainstream, increasingly silenced. The new generation are increasingly alienated by technology, and here I suggest a very interesting paper by Dieter von Hildebrand exactly on technology. So the new generation are increasingly alienated by technology, easily enclosing themselves in virtual worlds, looking to us for confrontation with adults and even peers. They Google everything, which I like to ironically call Godel. So Godel is the solution. And there is an ever-increasing focus on the use of language, which must be politically correct. So the language that they have to use have to be politically correct. This factor generates a lot of anxiety. And they have more and more episodes of for example, in the school of panic attacks, and giving up on completing instead, so students decide to give up the scholastic career. And the loss of confidence of a rational criteria representing reality, whereby one comes to question of the evidence, constitutes a fragile basis for knowledge and leads the individual to be increasingly subject to the tempers of current fashions. Even one's ideas cannot by definition be considered stable and effective. The subject wobbles and the experience of the marvelous becomes an exclusively individualistic and therefore unshareable thing. In reference to the anthropological crisis and the destruction of reason, here I recall the Remy Bragg's proposal of a Christian enlightenment that I found this thought-provoking. It is truly symptomatic that in a society that brags about rights, but then ideological fears are questioned, the freedom to ask is increasingly being lost. So some question may seemingly be inappropriate. And the operation that students often do in the face of complex topics is to put their reasoning away in a drawer by virtue of quiet life, or what is politically correct to ask or not to ask. So there is no more the freedom, in Italy, of students to ask, make questions. They feel not free anymore. So such an ideological mindset is a major obstacle to the attainment of the marvelous, which is instead a fully free experience in which the subject breathes and enjoys the new lore discovery. So in the younger generation, however, we increasingly witness the absence of questioning. The natural instinct of questioning is often repressed by virtue of uniformity of thought, and such repression generates a profound burden. Therefore, it no longer turns out to be legitimate to wonder. Everything is equal and boring. School is boring. So emblematic of this mentality is the recent cancel culture, whereby the difference of some parts of history must be cancelled. The spokesman of wonder, the discovery of the new world, exactly in the new world, has been demolished. And here, this is a picture, I refer to demolition of the statue of Christopher Columbus that happened in the United States and in Minneapolis 1 year ago in spring. So this is the problem of the cancel culture, and it's incredibly connected with education. So, but just go to the second point. So here it's very short, the second part, but I will try to give some insights about this discovery of this philosopher called Hildebrand, who fight a lot the Nazism and totalitarian religion, and he escaped in the United States, where he taught all his life at the Fordham University. You can read a very interesting biography written by the wife Alice Hildebrand in a book that is called The Soul of a Life. It's a sort of thriller, and there is a description of his escape from Europe to the United States. So, the first point, the distinction between amorality and immorality. I think that we can really see in schools also, but also in the university sometimes, this completely, not more mentioned distinction between what is amorality and what is immorality. Sometimes there is a complete, so they are completely unified one another. But in this paper, so in this talk, this unpublished talk written by him that he gave in Washington, he described the distinction between these two concepts. So it is significant the approach to the subject of education taken by the realist phenomenologist Virtous von Hildebrand himself, who during a workshop here in Washington, after surviving the Nazi threat and making his way to safety in the New World, denounced the tendency inherent in most of the teaching transmitted in American public school to eliminate the moral point of view in approach to life. As an aggravating factor, moreover, they rebuke the constant conceptual overlapping of amorality and immorality. as if refraining from judgment of right and wrong, good and evil, were interchangeable with the distinguishing these different realities. And the second part, so the proposal, his proposal is of a value response and the concept of importance that you can read in one of his most important books, is called Ethics. So in Ethics, he describes exactly the problem of the value response and the concept of importance. But what does it mean? So once the reason for leading a student into the world of wonder is understood, the question arises as to how this can be accomplished. And here again, Hildebrand's reflections is useful. He underlines the importance in the studium of responding to value, the value response. In the learning process, this means that the search in the world of knowledge must correspond to a desire for understanding for the important in itself. So this is the concept that he develops in ethics. What is the important in itself? And not for what he calls subjectively satisfying. So he makes the distinction between what is subjectively satisfying and important in itself. The interest aroused by the teacher, that is to say, in a specific subject matter, appears to the subject as an interest because it is responsive to a specific problem, to a given reality. When the student first learns the meaning of what an atom, for example, is dealing with taking an interest in a specific reality. This is the important in itself. That is a genuine reality characterized by a specific interest on the part of the subject. So, what is subjectively satisfying touches on an instantaneous pleasure, which does not last in time. What is important in itself has to do with the vocation of the subject and the ontology of the object. So this is why the response to value can for Hildebrand only concern morality. In the learning process, the reality of value is always taken for granted. In fact, referring to Aristippus of Cyrene, Hildebrand states that even those who deny morality actually tacitly presuppose the reality of value. A prise de conscience of the given reality is needed. This is why the discovery of the wonder, that is in the experience of the wonderfulness, even contemplation cannot be excluded. So we cannot exclude contemplation as something that makes us inactive in front of reality, but is included because it is extremely connected with the ontology of the object. So contemplation that probably is something completely as old and religious here and something metaphysical like fun. It's completely excluded in education. He is saying that in truth that has to be included in the process of learning because it's part of the nature of the ontology of the object. So contemplation cannot be excluded because it is a part related to the authenticity of the given reality, the essence of the discovery. So Hildebrand, embracing phenomenology realism, again in Washington stated, I quote, "It belongs to the very nature of value to possess its importance in itself, and thus the question when it arises, its importance is as nonsensical as the question, how do I know that something evident is evident? What criterion do we possess for evidence? In reality, the evidence of an importance in itself is much more intelligible in a much deeper sense of the term intelligence than the plausibility offered by the notion of something being important for something else." I think that is completely against the current mentality, this quotation. So he's saying we have to start not from our thinking, but just as the snow depicts from reality itself, because it is evidence, it's something evident. And then it is from this evidence that all the process of learning starts. And there is a very curious relation between a connection between this quotation by von Hildebrand and so the fact that he intended the primum in philosophy as the primum in philosophy for Hildebrand is the evidence, is the immediate data. Immediate data is what appears in front of us. With also a very curious page written by an Italian theologian called Father Giussani, wrote a curious book that is titled The Religious Sense. In this book, the author writes exactly the same concept. He writes, let us assume before us that the usual note of the example already given. If someone came up next to us and said, seriously, are you sure this is a block nose? So he's asking, are you sure that this is a glass? Are you sure that this is a glass? With some very quick So are you sure it is a block nose? What if it isn't? Our reaction would be one of astonishment, thinking with fear, like someone in front of by an eccentric. Aristotle, he says, we say that it is foolish to ask the reasons for what the evidence shows as fact. And here, in this context, supports there is a very huge, in the huge panorama of analytic philosopher, there are much of European analytical philosophers reflect hours and hours on, is this really at last? What do you think? So they spend more than an hour saying that this is a question. Okay. Anyway, but here, what he's saying is that that the primum in philosophy is this evidence. And this is very curious that we are losing ourselves in a debate about the glass. For example, there are much more other problems in the world. And in this sense, also philosophy has to reconquer its vocation towards reality. And Giussani continues to say, no one could live long and healthily, so not in a insane way, on the line of those abstract questions. Well, this kind of evidence is an aspect of what I have called elementary experience. So this elementary experience, the part that we start from a glass that is a glass, is exactly the same in the field. One is about exactly the problem of the evidence. But I go near to the conclusion. So the third part is much more is a methodological. So here I reflect to well, the student. Who is the student? We are teachers. We are in front of the students who are there. And the second part, I will put some very quickly. I will mention about some methods and tools that we can use in the learning process. So first of all, here I put the famous theory of Howard Gardner, about a professor at Harvard University, who in his theory of multiple intelligence lets a breakthrough shine through. So he challenged the traditional conception of intelligence and states that there are seven kinds of intelligence that can be distinguished. So he identifies the four intellectual macro groups. So there is the linguistic intelligence, the logical mathematical intelligence, the spatial intelligence, the musical intelligence, and so on. Many kinds of intelligence. So thus it is necessary to keep in mind that the student's predisposition are not accidental. So there is something really related to the nature of a person. And in this theory, we can verify that. So the second point is emotional capacity. But here, I will give the word to psychologists and pedagogists here in the room. So just to say that we cannot mention the emotional capacity of the student. I wish to mention the emotional capacity of the person that should not be overlooked. Structuralism has made a major contribution to situational philosophy. However, I will not deal with that in this study. But just remember that we have to consider also these aspects between about students. And the last point I would like to touch is the uniqueness. So the word personality comes from the Latin word persona. Personalitas of personalis and internal persona. So while personality implies something absolutely unrepeatable in a unique subject. Indeed, as the American psychologist Gordon Holford stated, personality means a set of traits of behavioral patterns that determine a person's particular abilities and activities occur in the environment in which she is involved. And just to mention the last part, so before the conclusion, the methods and the tools. Awareness of the uniqueness of the subject is sometimes overlooked. So, however, we have to consider that first, the school organization of people's lives, students' lives. And second, the teaching activity of the teacher. So concerning the first point, the increasing focus of the skill to be learned rather than on the subject, the stress to learn them, the pressure to stay at the right of the program rather than devoting lessons to confrontation, the proliferation of levels to define the limitation of post-fragile subjects, and the relative homogenization that result from this is evident. So these are some of the elements that lead to a homologations of students rather than emphasizing their individual and unique qualities. About teaching activities, on the other hand, it should be noted that the numerous work tasks, the large volume of deliveries, the nagging reminder of the need to complete the development of the imposed program, the increase in requests for summaries that can adapt to the new electronic instrumentation available, the number of assessments to be collected, and the increase in the administrative tasks. So all these kind of things, of course, are new elements. And all these are elements that make a teacher life constipated. Attention to the individual in all his uniqueness must be maintained. However, since it forms the foundational basis for full flourishing of the individual in his learning journey. And here, finally, about this point, I would like to quote the Mozart of psychology, so Vygotsky, this cognitive psychologist and pedagogue, and he speaks about the importance of the cooperative learning in organizing also lectures. Just go to the conclusion. As a conclusion, I would like to quote this, I think, wonderful book by Heschel, titled God in Search of Man, A Philosophy of Judaism. And in this book, he makes a very curious and interesting description of the concept of the wonder and about also the experience of what they call of the wonderfulness. And Heschel in this book affirms that modern man, I quote here, has fallen into the insidious error of believing that everything can be explained, that reality is a simple matter, that it only needs to be organized to be doing. And this approach is the greatest obstacle, he continues, to an awareness of the divine that begins precisely with wonder. Heschel again writes about wonder, and he calls this wonder absolute astonishment. So the wonder is the absolute astonishment, so it's the top. We can reach the top. And this absolute astonishment involves a wider sphere of reality than any other act of man. Whereas every act of perception or knowledge has as its object a particular segment of reality. Absolute wonders refers to the whole of reality, not only to what we see, but also to the very act of seeing, as well as to ourselves that sees and is amazed at this faculty of his. In education, I think it is necessary to consider the entire reality, so this wall of reality, and all its factors. This triggers a true virtuous cycle between teacher and students. So thank you in the, with all positive intention. This was referring to the previous paper. Thank you very much.